Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our Monitoring HVAC Performance with Hobo Data Loggers webinar. So I am your host, Taryn Picard. I'm the sales manager here at Onset Computer. The webinar today will last approximately 25 minutes. We will do our best to answer your questions at the end. We'll try to save about 5 minutes for Q&A, and if we don't answer your question, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We have a team of application specialists that would be more than happy to help you. And if you do have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type those in the questions section over on the right-hand side of your screen. A little bit about Onset. So Onset is a world leader in data loggers. We have been in business for about 40 years. And a really fun fact for you is that building is actually located right here on Cape Cod, where I am. And Sean and Scott as well. We do all of our manufacturing, assembling. We have operations there. We have our sales, marketing, everybody in one spot right there on Cape Cod. The agenda for today, we will go over some of the guidelines that ASHRAE is recommending. We'll talk about how to prepare, why you should be using data loggers. We'll get into some common uses, and then we'll review the types of loggers we offer, as well as the methods of collecting your data. And we'll review a couple of common applications, and again, Q&A. So for today, your presenters joining me are Scott Ellis, our product line manager. Scott focuses on our indoor HVAC and building performance product line, as well as Sean Kelly, an account development manager here at Onset. And Sean's been with us for about 10 years, focusing on helping customers with their application and product selections.
All right, so I guess I'll kind of jump in here, and one of the things is obviously between the World Health Organization, the WHO, and the CDC, you're hearing about some of these, what should we be doing? Just open the windows and try to get fresh air in there. And what does that really mean? And I think one of the things that ASHRAE has done has kind of taken a step back and given some guidelines on, exactly how should people begin to reopen buildings, and what are the important things that you're going to need to look at as we're doing this. If you want to hit the next slide. So, and one of the things that you will want to take a look at is there's some handouts here. We've uploaded 5 PDFs that get into really the details of understanding, and going into these guidelines, and, whether it's the inspection and maintenance, what should we be looking at for ventilation? There's the MERV rating of 13, which has been recommended for filtration, and with all of this, our concern over the past 10 to 20 years has been conserving energy. And now some of the things that we're talking about is actually going in the opposite direction. Now, keeping in mind that these are, short-term changes, but there are definitely some things that, need to be thought about as we are doing this. So if you want to hit the next slide there. And so in terms of and temperature and humidity and looking at human comfort, there's ranges that you'll want to maintain, 68 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity levels 40 to 60%. It was interesting. A number of us have been listening to a lot of these webinars, and what should we be doing? And some of this is going to depend upon where you're at in the country. If you're in Florida right now, you're probably not going to want to open up your windows and let in that 90% humidity, because you're just going to overwork the HVAC system. And for those HVAC systems that are using demand control ventilation and have CO2 sensors in there, you're going to want to maintain 800 to 1,000 parts per million or ppm. If you can hit the next slide. At the end of the day, though, it really does take a team. It's not just one person who is going to be able to go in. There may be one person who's responsible, maybe the building operations person or the facility, the head of the facility, but it may require outside sourcing. I think anything that gets done here is not a bad thing. It's understanding that, is your building working correctly, and how should your building be working? As Taryn stated, we do everything here on Cape Cod. Well, our building's only at 50% capacity right now. Um, so I know that we've made some tweaks internally to our system, at least in one of the buildings, because of sales, engineering, customer service. We're all remote now. We're all at home. But it may require a number of these folks to come in and potentially do some studies and looking at the systems and make sure that they are actually working correctly. If you want to hit the next slide. So, I think one of the biggest things is the physical assessment, looking at, and it could be just simply opening these things up and, is the filter in there properly? If your system supports the maximum MERV rating of 13, I believe they do go up to 16 actually, but they're recommending that. What's your rate of replacing filters? Are there gaps? Just looking at it, any place where air is maybe not going through that filter, and you could use something as simple as duct tape just to close up those holes. Looking at the building automation system, does the existing schedule match the current occupancy capacity? They've been recommending that there's a pre and post flush of the air for 2 hours before occupancy and after. So that may change how your systems are going to start up in the morning and eventually, shut down at night. So these are all considerations, that you should be looking at and working with your facility manager. And at the end of the day, you're going to find that this is where our equipment also comes into place, where to verify that a building automation system might be working correctly, and using portable data loggers, which ASHRAE does recommend, or even just handheld instruments, to be able to make sure that those areas are working the way that they're supposed to be working. I want to hit the next slide. So we've got Taryn's going to open up a poll question here. Are you currently using data loggers?
All right, great. Well, I've just launched the poll. We'll give everybody a second to see those results pour in. But so far, it looks like we have the majority of our attendees for this webinar already using data loggers, and they're using hobos, which we love to see. So thank you guys for that. That's great. I'll just leave the poll open for another second here. All right, so let's share those results. And like I said, we're looking at about 75% using Hobo data loggers. That is great. Thank you so much. All righty, and we'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, and at this point, I'll have Sean kind of jump in here and take over the rest of the presentation.
Great, thanks guys. Yeah, hi everybody, thanks for coming. It's great to hear that most of you are using our loggers. What I'm going to touch on over the next few minutes is a couple things. Why we use data loggers, or why should you use data loggers, some common uses, some of our more common loggers for indoor applications, and then we'll get into some actual applications. So why use data loggers? We want, in this environment now, this world that we're living in, it's more important than ever to make sure that your HVAC system is running properly. You want to be able to comply with those ASHRAE guidelines and safety standards that Scott was talking about, that 800 to 1,000 ppm or the 40 to 60% relative humidity. And another reason to use data loggers is because they're low cost, accurate, effective ways to measure those parameters, especially those three parameters, that CO2, temp, and relative humidity. All right, so common uses for data loggers, they range from indoor, outdoor, underwater, temperature controlled environments, really anywhere that data is needed and the convenience of battery powered is preferred. Now, we are focusing more on the temperature, relative humidity, and the CO2 here for this particular talk, but be aware that we do have other loggers that will monitor energy, power, state, so your light on off or motor on off, kilowatt hours, those types of things. So just be aware of that, and we'll go over a few of those. The different types of loggers that we have, I'll start with the USB. So temperature, relative humidity, occupancy, light, on-off state, like I was saying, that maybe an open and door close or an external channel on our UX90 state logger that will take in kilowatt hours, a pulse from a kilowatt hour transducer, and then our Hobo 4 channel, which in the HVAC space or the facility space, this is probably the most common logger for troubleshooting. You're able to put in multiple probes, so multiple external temperature probes, and maybe your supply and return, your mixed air, and we'll throw in some amperage there to get some power. That logger will fit that. Now, with USB loggers, they're more, set it and forget it. You're going to connect it to a computer running our HoboWare software, where you configure it, unplug it, put it in its place, let it log. When you're ready to get your data, you're going to plug it back in, offload, and then in our HoboWare software, it has some pretty powerful graphing and analysis functions or features that you could use, and then even export it out to Excel or a CSV file. Another type of logger are Bluetooth loggers, and I'm highlighting the CO2 logger here, but in general, the loggers will connect to a smart device running our Hobo Connect app. So iPhone, iPad, Android device, so Android tablet, configure it and download it with that device. And then from there, you can email out that data file in, say, an Excel file or a CSV, or even a .hobo that would open up in our HoboWare software. Now, this particular logger here, the MX1102, does use that same wireless Bluetooth communication. So you get about 100 feet clear line of sight. It features a 6-month battery life at 5-minute logging, 5-minute logging rate. So that's something you really don't see when it comes to CO2 logging or even sensing. Typically, because the CO2 sensor uses so much power, there's a need to plug it into an outlet. So with this, we were able to find a CO2 sensor that didn't require as much power. And so we're able to offer that flexibility of movement if you want. You're not a slave to the power. So again, easy to deploy with our Hobo Connect app. It does offer audible and visual alarms. So you'll see on the LCD screen, you have a little bell icon, you get a red light, and you'll also hear a beep should any of those thresholds, high or low, that you set should be passed. And I mentioned the CO2 sensor. So it does have a self-calibrating NDIR CO2 sensor. Before this webinar, we did have the question of how does that work? How does the calibration on that sensor work? This logger offers not only a manual calibration up front, but it offers an auto calibration in the future. So initially what you'll do is you'll configure the logger, you'll place it outside for about 5-10 minutes, let it acclimate, hit the calibrate button. It goes through a process about five minutes, and then after that, you're good to go. You're good to put it in its place. What it's doing is it's taking that fresh air and setting what that logger sees to 400 ppm. Put it in its place. 8 days later, if you have that auto calibration enabled, what it will do is it'll take the lowest three consecutive readings and set that to 400. So if you're in spaces that are unoccupied, so say, or times of unoccupied, so say like a classroom, the AutoCal will be great. If it's in a spot where maybe it's occupied at all times, think a hospital, then you may want to start with just the manual calibration and then do another manual calibration 8 to 14 days later. Another feature of the Bluetooth loggers, really any of our MX loggers, is that they're compatible with our MX gateway, which is really going to be the more hands-off approach where you just configure it initially and then the data will go to our HoboLink cloud. Some of the other Bluetooth loggers that we have are our MX1101 temperature relative humidity logger, and then our newer analog loggers that we just came out with, the 1104, which is the temperature relative humidity light, and then an additional external channel. So think of that temperature probe, an external temperature probe, or a third-party sensor maybe that has a 4 to 20 milliamp output or a voltage output. And then the MX1105, which is the newer Bluetooth version of that UX124 channel that we saw earlier. That's going to give you, that supply return, air, those types of measurements with external temperature readings. So I touched on the MX gateway. Really what this is going to do is like I said, the more hands-off approach. So it's going to take the measurements from the MX loggers, those Bluetooth loggers, through that Bluetooth signal, and send it to our HoboLink cloud server. So, and the way this works is it will connect to Wi-Fi or Ethernet. It does need to be AC powered, but you can plug it into PoE, so power over Ethernet. With this is what opens you up to alarm notifications. So email or text alerts, custom data exports, data delivery, things like that. A dashboard, custom data dashboard in our HoboLink cloud, you're able to do. So with that, you're setting up, it's essentially a blank slate to begin with, but you set up widgets and you can set up to 20 widgets per dashboard, 10 dashboards per account. And then you can even make that public. So if you wanted to provide a customer or someone in your organization with access to that dashboard, but you don't want to give up that administrative access, you can enable a public URL and just provide that to them. Like the app, the gateway needs to be within about 100 feet clear line of sight of the loggers. Another web-based remote solution that I wanted to highlight was our RX stations. These will send the data to that same HoboLink cloud, so you'll still get that automated delivery, every 10 minutes, every hour, but you'll also set up or have the ability to set up alarm notifications via text or email, set up those same custom dashboards and data delivery. We've recently come out with HoboNet sensors. So these HoboNet wireless sensors use a mesh technology. So you get about 1,500 feet clear line of sight. So very strong signal. Indoors, it'll be less if there's walls. I've seen it personally on sites go 300-400 feet through walls, through metal racks, no issue at all. But with that, that's something that you'd also obviously want to speak with an application specialist, and we'll walk you through that. We'll be able to even take a look at, say, a floor plan. Now, it is scalable, which is one of the great things here. It goes up to 50 wireless sensors. So you can set up to 50 wireless sensors. Now, the one that we have that would be of most interest to our audience today would probably be our temperature relative humidity. We call them MOTES. They run on 2 AA lithium batteries, and you get up to a year of battery life on it. And those 50 go to one station. I should add that. So now I'll turn it over to Taryn for the moment for poll question number 2.
Great, thank you, Sean. And so moving on to poll question number 2, what is your primary application for data loggers? Go ahead and launch that poll and we'll see what the results are. Excellent, and it looks like most of the attendees joining us today are focused on indoor air quality as well as HVAC. We are going to get into a couple of applications in just a moment that will be relevant to what you guys are looking for, as well as a lot of energy projects. I see that too, so that's wonderful. Hold on one moment. Let me close out the poll and share those results with everyone. All right, and with that, we will move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Taryn. All right, so some common applications, which I'm sure our audience is very aware of. Building commissioning, mold remediation, something we see a lot actually in colleges and universities. The M word is a 4-letter word that, you know, it's one of those things that schools need to get a really good idea of what's going on in those rooms, because that's the last thing you want to have happen, especially in dormitories. Preservation, so museums, analyzing air handlers, just, you know, typical troubleshooting. And then routine verification of equipment operation. You'll see our loggers not only to verify the equipment or the building automation systems, but they're also supplemental to those stations. So we'll see those in places that EMS or the BAS system won't hit. So it really gives you a better idea of truly what's going on. It'll give you more points, and again, in those spots that those systems can't hit. So now, one thing is, I've mentioned it a couple times with those 4-channel loggers, but you're able to see it here a little better, is, you know, troubleshooting and toolbox items, as we call them. So a lot of HVAC techs or facilities managers or facilities folks will have a toolbox of data loggers. So they'll have, you know, one of these UX 120s or the MX 1105 with the temperature probes and maybe some current transducers. Maybe they'll have one of our UX 90s with a watt node kilowatt hour transducer and some CTs to get a really better idea of the kWh draw. But for this one, it's kind of showing you here where you have your mixed air, your return air, your supply air, just the flexibility with that particular logger. And then one that I really wanted to touch on was a customer that I've worked with for a while. Jim Campbell, he's an energy manager for a school district in Virginia. So he would use them for years to, you know, troubleshoot, see what's going on. You'll see the picture here. It's one of our older U12 loggers, but he uses them to verify that energy management system is starting up, shutting down at the right times to make sure that they're maintaining that comfortable temperature of 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit when the building is occupied or when the buildings are occupied. Also, to verify that, you know, in the summer that the air conditioning is running at the minimum amount of time, but still achieve that 40% relative humidity. That way, you know, avoiding any issues that could lead to mold. Now, recently, we had talked, and it's probably about 8 weeks ago, and it's something we're seeing a whole lot of now. And it's not only school districts, but it's also, say, office spaces or building management companies that are looking to get an idea of what's going on in these spaces as they talk about students coming back to school, or they're talking about workers, employees coming back to the office. And it's really that they need to get an idea of the airflow and the air exchange rates. And this is the way to verify that. So, you know, again, supplemental to some of the things that Scott touched on, this particular logger, this MX 1102, that actually Jim came to us and said that he needed a way to figure out what's going on in these classrooms, and And to his credit, he came up with it. I didn't suggest it. He came to me with the idea, and it made perfect sense. So what they did is they bought a good amount of the CO2 loggers so they could place them in these classrooms when they're occupied, and they'd leave them there for 2 weeks and then move it to the next room. And what it's really going to do, it's going to give them a rough idea of what's going on, but it's really going to show those critical spaces that need attention. Now, with that, they're also able to see that they're falling within those ASHRAE recommended guidelines. One suggestion or tip, I would say that if you're using this logger, it's probably something you want to have in a spot where it's not next to an open door, or a door that opens and closes a lot, or a window that's going to be opened and closed a lot in the next few weeks. Put it in a space where maybe 6 feet up and off a little bit, and that's going to give you a truer idea of what's going on. So with that, the ultimate goal, I think, with everyone, and probably everyone here today, is that it's safety, and it's a way that you'll be able to, show that either the environment or the HVAC system is working how it should, or that it may need attention. So with that, we're going to open it up to questions, and I'll turn it back over to Taryn.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Sean. We do have several of questions that have come up. And so I am going to ask you some of these questions in general sense, because we have some specific ones. But if you would, please, between you and Scott, talk a little bit about the calibration method, how using this logger outdoors to calibrate it will still give you accurate readings. If you can speak a little bit more to that, that'd be great.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, so, and I think what they're referring to is that not everywhere is 400 ppm. It does vary. It could vary, 10, 20 ppm, right? So with this, the logger itself has an accuracy of plus or minus 50 ppm. So any calibration, outdoor calibration, could fall or would fall in, within that spec. That being said, we do have customers that will use, if there is a concern, a 400 ppm gas and say a bladder to calibrate. So that can be done that way.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in. We had a couple questions that were submitted prior to this, so thank you for everybody that did send in some questions. And a number of these is, can you talk a little bit about in terms of the online and the can our system feed back into a building automation system? Is that a possibility? And if it's not, but but using HubleLink in the web, is there a way to be able to potentially pull data and feed that back into a system?
Well, with ours, what I always say to customers that are asking that question is, it depends. It's a tough one. So we have the ability out of our HubleLink cloud to pull the data through an API through REST web services. So and it's essentially a stripped down CSV file. So if there's a way to systematically pull that on your end and bring that into your automation system, then that's where you get it's possible. It's not designed that way, but we do try to give you the ability to access that data systematically.
No, that's good. Thanks, Sean.
Great, and I think we can wrap it up with one more quick question. And this one you might be able to answer 2 in 1. So if you can talk a little bit about HubleLink and how people can access their data, as well as API connections and configurations.
Sure. Actually, we just touched on the API a little bit. We do offer the REST web services, so you are able to pull the data systematically into your own program if you need to. As far as HoboLink, there's a whole lot in HoboLink, a lot of features. The biggest being access to the data through custom data exports. So you can set up as many data exports as you'd like, really, and it can be on the sensor level to actually the measurement levels of the sensor. You can set that up for data delivery, so you can have a data file emailed to you if you'd like. There's different formats to have that. One being Hobo CSV or HoboWare CSV, so you could import it into our HoboWare software if you're comfortable using that graphing and analysis software. But yeah, you're also able to send an Excel file if you'd like as well. Other big features there that I always like to highlight are the alarms. So you can set up your alarm notifications to as many people as you'd like, to email or text. So we have the ability to do either. And then the dashboard. The dashboard is, again, each account. So you have a HoboLink account that your data is going to flow into. And you're able to set up these dashboards, and it's 10 dashboards per account and 20 widgets per dashboard. And those widgets it could be a line chart where you want to take multiple measurements and overlay them. So say you have multiple CO2 measurements from different rooms, and you want to place them on top of one another. You can do that. And then you can set up thermometers for your temperatures or gauges for your relative humidity. And then, as I touched on, you can also set up that public link. So by doing that, you get a URL where it's essentially a snapshot of that dashboard. It's a read only, and you can see a day, week, or month view. And we do have customers that take that and put them on monitors to make them public. So that's just a few of the highlights of HoboLink, but it's actually a very powerful online tool.
Hey, Sean, how do we get in touch with you, man?
So
that's a great
actually,
question.
I know. Before you go on to the next slide here, I do have one last poll question for you guys. So I would just like to launch a last poll question here that would say, would you like someone from Onset to contact you? So if you have specific questions that weren't answered during the webinar today and you would like to speak with an application expert, we certainly can have someone reach out to you and talk to you specifically about what your application is, what products you need help with. We can, walk through and brainstorm with you if you're not sure exactly which item would work best for you. We have a team here at Onset that can certainly help you. Alrighty, and with that, I'll close out that poll. Thank you guys so much. I don't need to share those results. And now we can share Sean's contact info. So if you didn't hit yes in the last question, you can find our contact information right here.
And I guess just a couple other things. I've sent everybody through the chat a couple of links. One over to those ASHRAE guidelines. So if you want to dive into their website in more detail, please check out the chat screen, as well as Erica and others who are interested in the HoboLink API user's guide. I have sent that out to folks as well. And in terms of actually just getting up and running with HoboLink, Naomi, you can just go to hobolink.com and basically create an account, and then you're kind of off and running from there. So we do have a lot of help documents up there, as well as the web services guide that I just sent out to everybody, so you can check that out as well.
Yeah, and you can find a lot of information in the handout section as well that we had uploaded before this webinar, so feel free to reference the handouts as well.
I think we've covered everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking some time to talk a little bit about hobos and how you can use those to monitor your HVAC system. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.